Hey everybody. Okay, so I was just looking at all of my little flour bricks. Here's a little example of one. Um, and I was pulling the lid off because when I'm transferring them to the shelf to dry, I'm going to take the lid off, double check that it's not sticking, and clean up any of the boogers like I mentioned previously. And so a lot of times what will happen though in this case is I will do a little bit of brushing. I have a little dry brush here, but what I'll notice is, and this will happen, these have been sitting under plastic just loosely covered, but you'll see that there's a little sort of crack forming in this little corner right here. You can kind of see it, and here too. And so if that happens, it's very likely that that will happen. It's always marrying two pieces of clay that aren't the same temperature. There's going to be a little bit of pull away. And so this is kind of just like a tip and something to think about. So instead of putting water in there, I'm trying to push clay in there, what I typically do is I will take my corner rib, so you can use this guy, or a little metal rib, and all I'm going to do is try to basically compress that clay. This is really a leather hard, so I do want to be careful with the form. If I push too hard, I could run the risk of breaking it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the corner of this rib and compress the clay into that little crack that was forming. If your clay is bone dry, this is not going to work particularly. What I would caution against also is adding water to these crevices. That's what I see people do all the time, is they basically will just add more water. And the problem with that is that water just makes the crack bigger. So you just want to really compress that clay. You can do it from the outside. You know, I basically am just pushing a little bit of this clay that's the same temperature into that sort of corner. And you can kind of see goes away relatively. There may still be a crack that is there or that is forming, but what I've done is just kind of given it a little bit more reinforcement and making sure that it's not pulling away too much. If you find like a big chunk has fallen off, you're kind of just screwed. You're gonna want to just start again. This is really just a good temperature because it's still super cold, leather hard. I can still make marks into it. But I can sort of correct any of those problems that are happening right now, and then just let it set and dry. It also gives me an indication that maybe I need to let it dry slowly and not quickly, depending on the temperature differential between my clay and the room. If it's getting directional air, like I have a forced fan here with heat, which basically I don't want these to directionally sort of dry, just because these are relatively fragile at this point, and so I really want to make sure that I'm giving them ample time. They took a long time to do, so I want them to have ample time to just dry naturally and not develop cracks. And so any of the little boogers I'll just wipe off. Set this over here. Let me see on this guy. I haven't opened this guy up. And so this is also a time if, like, say when I was doing this, I didn't really take off a lot of the lines on the top. It was a little bit soft, but I didn't want to push it down. So now is a good time for me to come back with my little red rib and just soften any of those mark lines that I don't want to be super apparent. And because this has got some nice strength to it now. And so now to get it apart, hopefully, yeah, there we go. And I'm just gently pulling that apart, right? And you can kind of see on the inside, there's a few things there. I'll either use my knife, or I'll use my little wood knife and I'll just sort of clean it up. Make sure that I don't have any super big kind of marks. And then I'll just use my brush and I'll just sort of clean up. And when I have a nice dry brush, it will kind of give that edge just a nice cleaned up, sort of softened thing. So that's just clean. And then looking at this, I also have all these things that I didn't take out. Now's a good time. They kind of just fall out. I can come back with my dry brush, get any of the bigger chunks out. And it looks like it looks pretty good. The other thing that will happen sometimes is you'll notice when you put a lid on, here's a little section, that the lid will kind of compress around that flange a bit. And what I'll do then is I just will take my rib and I'll clean that and sort of shave off just a smidge. because I don't want it to stick, because it's only going to get tighter as it fires, because these get fired together. So I'll just come around, make sure that I don't have any kind of weirdness where maybe I squish the flange a little bit, getting that to fit. And then I'll just put them back together and put them on the shelf. So there you go. And this is also the time I would take off my guide marks, because I don't want those to be there when I glaze. A lot of times I'll use glazing as my key instead of a mark, because like this one specifically will only fit one way. So I just want to make sure that I don't have little X's there for no reason. So anyways, just a quick little video about troubleshooting those kinds of cracks. No water, recompress with just a nice soft corner rib, and then make sure you can get the lid off of these before you put them in the fire, and you really want to be able to take that off. Okay, thanks guys, bye.